Let's talk about repetition in C++. So far we have seen a sequential execution in C++ where we have one statement or another. We've also seen conditional execution where we branch using an if or if else or a switch statement. But let's talk about how to repeat code over and over again in C++. Now, repeating code over and over again in C++ is called iteration or looping. So as an example, let's take the situation where we want to print numbers from 1 through n, where n is being held in a variable. If n holds 13, we would print 1, 2, 3, 4, so on till 13. Now, to do this, we need a way to execute statements over and over again, and we need a way to control the repetition so it actually ends. It is important to control the looping to end, otherwise you get an unending loop, which is also called an infinite loop, which goes on forever and ever, and we'll see that in a little bit. Uh, Now, a term that I would like you to become familiar with is called iteration. And iteration is one go around the loop. So a loop goes through many iterations. In C++, we have several constructs such as while and do while and for to do looping. But let's start by talking about a while loop, which is the simplest form of a loop available to us. Now, it's not unique to C++. Other languages such as Java and Python also have while loops. So while loop looks as follows. We have a new keyword or reserved word called while. It is followed by a Boolean expression in parentheses called a conditional. And then after that is the while body, which is a block of statements. So the execution of a while loop proceeds as follows. You come in, you evaluate this Boolean expression. If it evaluates to true, you execute the block, the statements in the block. And you keep on doing that over and over again while the conditional evaluates to true. Now, as soon as the conditional evaluates to false, you proceed after the while loop. The while loop execution stops. Now, if you only have one statement in the while body, you can skip the curly braces. Now, visually, it might look something like this, where you're testing a conditional. If it's true, you keep on executing the while body. As soon as it's false, you drop out of the while loop. Now, let's look at the program where we're printing numbers from 1 through n. Let's see what it looks like. Actually, I will copy this program onto the IDE and we will talk about it there. So here we have our IDE. We will paste the program right here. So let's take a look at this. Let's see what's happening. So one of the things you see here is we are declaring two variables n and I in the same line, but we're only initializing I to 1. And I is going to be our loop variable that we'll look at in a little bit. Then we have a prompt. We enter n, and then we capture it, and then we print it out to make sure that we have actually read it correctly. Then you have the while loop. Here, in every iteration, we are auto incrementing I. We're checking I, it continues to stay less than or equal to n, and then we print I, right? So starting from 1, it will go to 2, 3, 4 till it is equal to or less than n, right? So let's actually try this out and see what happens. So if you print 5, it will print 1 through 3, 4, 5. Like in the example, if we had 13, it will print 1 through 13. Now, what could you do here to the program to make it go into infinite loop? Now, we've said that something must change in the while loop to bring it close to termination, to actually terminate the loop. Now, if we comment out the incrementing, this conditional may never become false. So let's actually try this out. And so even if you enter 5, it's just going to stay at 1. And we'll keep on looping over the 1. We'll have to kind of stop it explicitly and we'll terminate it, right? Um, right. Now, what else could we do here? Now, what could we do to make this program fail? Now, it's expecting an integer. If we, for example, put in something that's not an integer, like the letter A, it will not even go in the while loop. So to see this more in detail, now cin has some functions which allow us to tell whether the input was good or bad, right? So what we could do is cin good, and put this in, sorry, put this in if statement. So let's do that. If cin was good, then we, print out what we read. Else, we print out, for example, failure, right? So let's try that out and see whether it shows us something else. So here, if we enter A, it said, oh, I got some bad input. So let's go back to our lesson here. So that is what I'm talking about here. Well, how can we make the program go into infinite loop, and how can we make the program fail? Now let's take another example. Here we have the factorial example. Factorial is another one, a good one to use a while loop for. Now, factorial, if you remember, is n factorial is n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 till all the way, it goes down to 1. So 3 factorial is 3 times 2 times 1. 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So the code for computing factorial is below. So let's actually try this one out. I'll just copy and we'll talk about it in the IDE. So let's go to the IDE and then we'll copy that code here. And let's talk about it. So this is the code for factorial. And what is happening here? Again, we have a couple of variables, n and factorial. Now, n is what we're going to use now as our loop variable, and factorial is the result that we will hold. Again, we have a prompt where we read n, and since n is going to be our looper, we kind of print out n factorial is right here in the beginning, because we're going to lose n because we're going to be using it as our loop variable. And then we go from, factorial is equal to, it starts with n, and we keep on decrementing n. So if it's 5, it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way till it goes to 0, and that's when we know that we're going to stop. So let's actually try this out and see what happens. Now here we enter 5, and it gives us 5 factorial, which is indeed 120. Now what could we do here to make this go into an infinite loop? What could we, without changing the program, what could we change to the what we enter for n to make it go into the loop? Now, since it's depending on 0, if the number that we enter was negative, it's already negative and it's being decremented, it'll never get to 0. So it will go into an infinite loop. So I'll actually try this out. And what you will see, it is actually going infinite loop, and we just don't see the result. We can see the result by actually printing what's printing n. So what you will see is cout n. And actually, let's actually try this out. So if you say -3, you'll see it keeps on decrementing forever, and that's not a good thing. That's actually an infinite loop. So what could we do? We could change this condition so it's not depending on an n. So on actually being 0. So we could say while n is greater than 0, and that might be a better condition. So let's actually try that out, and we say 5 and actually stop. And now if we print a negative number, we enter a negative number, it is not going to actually work. It's going to stop right away, right? So let's go back to our lesson. So notice that we used auto decrement for n. The thing you have to be careful about is the n condition. You might have a situation, what's called an off by 1 error, that you might end up picking up an extra iteration when you didn't mean to. We already talked about an infinite loop and how to avoid that.